Time for the Smash, everybody. Monday Smash. Ira Schoffel, managing editor of Warchant.com, the ultimate Seminoles sports source. Joining me, Aslan Hajivandi, director of digital media for Warchant.com, the ultimate Seminoles sports source. Won't you join us for only $1 American, everybody? That can get you 2 months of premium access to Warchant.com, and you get to hop on the On3 message board. Check out everything that's going on with your favorite rivals fan base. Again, FSU on the promo code, 2 months, $1 American. Ira, how are you, man? We're going to be in a car in less than a week, cruising up to Charlotte, getting ready for the official, unofficial start to the football season. I'm stoked. I hope you are as well.
We sure are. And apparently we maybe will have a big NCAA 2025 tournament hosted by Matt Lasser, although then Jeff came back and said Xbox isn't good enough for him. It's got to be on PS5, which is cool and all. But then Jeff didn't say he was volunteering to bring his PS5. So I'm not sure how that's going to shake out. But yeah, man, it's going to be the fellas hanging out in Charlotte. It's going to be a good time.
It's been a long time since I've thrown a remote controller and rage quit a game, so looking forward to it. We talked about this before. This really epic road trip my friends and I did in 2003 up to Notre Dame, like in a minibus, and we actually had it rigged so that we had a television on board with an Xbox, and we were playing like NCAA 2004. And like I rage quit on the bus. It was terrible. I haven't gotten any better. I'm gonna try 1% day by day. You might be able to save way more than 1% when you change your insurance over to State Farm. And Russ Voorhis, loyal, longtime Florida State alum supporter, 2 locations out there. But hey, more than just one state, Florida's got you covered, right, Ira? If you're interested in getting some home, car coverage, things of that nature.
Yeah, all your insurance needs, Russ will take care of them. He's based in Jacksonville, the Jacksonville area, but he services Florida, Georgia, and Alabama. He's got a staff there that's very friendly and very helpful, and they're Noles. Russ is a huge Nole, and so if you call and if you inquire or you go to their website and ask for more information, be sure to mention that you're Noles. You heard about him on the Smash. You're a fan of Warchant like he is, and they'll take care of you. They do great service and just a really good guy. He'll talk some ball with you as well.
Yeah, big Florida State fan, figuratively and literally.
Big large human being.
Big tree. Everybody here in the chat, we thank you for being here. Hit the thumbs up. Ask your questions. We'll get involved in here. We'll hop in and take your questions, things of that nature. We did get an announcement today from Florida State. Well, 2 announcements. One a little bit more inside football media, if you will. We'll speak to some newcomers. We'll get to that here in a second, Ira. But obviously, ACC kickoff starts this coming Monday up in Charlotte, North Carolina. We're going to have a huge contingent from Warchant.com. If I'm not mistaken, even Corey's going to be there this year. Which is always a delight for everybody involved.
Yeah.
But the whole story always is like who's going to be invited or who's going to represent each university that's in part of the ACC up there. So last week, DJ Uiagalelei took the really, unprecedented step of saying like, hey, really honored, been there before, but I'm going to sit this one out. I think we should send somebody that's, been here and helped this school and this team accomplish what they did last year. Really an awesome gesture. I'm sure you guys talked about that on headlines. But it's going to be Joshua Farmer, Patrick Payton, and Darius Washington representing Florida State up in Charlotte. I was very surprised by those 3, but they're very deserving. What were your thoughts, Ira?
Who were you thinking might go?
I mean, when you ask it that way, it's like, well, that's a good point. But it's just like Josh Farmer, we didn't see him a lot in spring. Right. But again, I think he's the first recruit that committed, like high school recruit that actually committed to Mike Norvell. So that might be like a cool full circle thing as he enters a money season.
Yeah, I think all 3 of those guys, they tell a similar story. Well, 2 stories. One is lines of scrimmage, obviously. But the other one is, the fact that all 3 of them are guys who came to Florida State as high school recruits, redshirted their first years, put in the time, didn't take off and go somewhere else, and have developed into all ACC caliber players. And it's a cool story. Yeah, and all of them are really interesting guys. So I think they'll do well. I did think Lawrence Toafili fits in that mix as well. Lawrence Toafili, I think he was the first guy that what Mike Norvell called when he became head coach. He'd already been committed to Willie Taggart's staff, and they were able to keep him. But yeah, I mean, Darius and Josh Farmer to me are if you're Florida State and you want to sell the story of we develop high school football players because everybody thinks we're just transfer you. Josh Farmer and Darius Washington are as good as they get because they were both 3-star recruits. Darius might have been less than a 3-star when he signed with Florida State. I'm not sure but he's a 3-star recruit at the end of the day. Both those guys have developed into big time college football players. And Patrick Pate was a 4-star, but he also needed to develop. He was really skinny coming out of high school. He had to put on some size, and he's done that. So that's the story. And that's the thing that a lot of schools are using against them in recruiting is that, oh, don't sign at Florida State because they're just going to bring in transfers over top of you. But these guys are shining examples of bringing high school players in and them developing.
So that said, do you think this was a kind of purposeful announcement or selections rather, that Florida State kind of does want to flex the developmental muscle that they might not be getting proper credit for out there in circles?
It doesn't hurt. And I think it also, it checks a few boxes. I mean, I think that's one of them, but I also think, and DJ Uiagalelei did talk about it last week when he said, I'm a new guy here. I don't want to go to the big stage of ACC kickoff, ACC media days, and take the spot of one of the guys who was on a team that won 13 games, won the ACC championship, and just, kind of as a carpetbagger in today's age of college football, just showing up and being one of those guys. So I thought it was a smart gesture on his part. And the same thing would go for a Malik Benson. I think Malik Benson's a guy that you'd say maybe, he's going to be one of the stars on this team. And it wouldn't be crazy to bring him to ACC kickoff. He might be the top offensive player, skill player on this team. And but again, it kind of goes with that narrative of, we're going to reward and honor the guys that kind of helped get us here.
Shyheim or Azarie might have been, I think, in terms of like accolades, Azarie might be that guy that's going to earn a bunch of them. But in terms of like spiritual leader of a football team, a locker room, like Shyheim to me strikes that kind of tone. And again, I'm just an absolute sucker for a good quote. And I just think Shyheim's probably got a couple up his sleeve in that kind of environment. So that would have been cool to hear from him. But I got no listening to these three guys. Yeah,
Shyheim would have been really good. Azarie would be tough just because he hasn't started yet. He only started the Georgia game. So I think that would have been tough, but not out of the question. But, you have these other guys who have been all ACC players and have started a ton of football games. That might be a little weird to bring a different guy. And I think Azarie is certainly worthy. He may be one of the best players on the defense, but I just don't know that, from what he's done so far. But Shyheim would have been a good pick as well. And I do think, man, like, Darius is obviously very bright and he's fun to talk to. We'll see how he does like at a dais, but some of those guys have done that before. They've done it at bowl games or the ACC championship game. They've done it some. So it'll be a little bit different for them, but I think all three of those guys will be fun. Josh Farmer's got personality for sure. And Patrick Payton, it depends on what day you catch him, but my guess is that day he's going to use as an opportunity to probably give a little bit more of his personality.
I think Darius is going to be quite outspoken, man. I mean, there's been times like I always, this anecdote I talked about like last year while we were in Jacksonville, like, I don't know, for some reason, like, cause Maurice had been on Trench Talk with like Robert Cooper the year prior. So like he recognized me or whatever. And we're in Jacksonville and like in between reps, like I looked at Maurice, I'm like, man, can you explain to me who just won the previous rep, which I probably shouldn't be talking to him during practice, but I did. And like Darius overheard it. And Darius looks at me, he's like, it doesn't matter. It's not about who wins or loses. It's just about doing a good rep. And I'm like, whoa, okay. All right, man. I'm not trying. So, I'm sure if he gets some question that he doesn't like, I'm sure he'll kind of be a little bit assertive about it. And that's cool. Hey, it's fine. If we want them to be outspoken, we got to take it both ways. So looking forward to that. We'll be up in Charlotte again for ACC kickoff. Is it 4 days now? But we're only gonna be there for Monday. But they've tried to make it into a big bonanza. Yeah. Bless their hearts. I guess to a lesser degree.
Yeah, it's gonna be 4 days. The first day will be Florida State, Georgia Tech, and I think SMU. And the commissioner Jim Phillips will have his comments. That'll be fun. And then then we're gonna blow that popsicle stand. And Florida State's gonna be practicing, I think, on Wednesday of that week. We think July 24th. They haven't announced it yet, but we think that's probably when they're going to start practice, which is, man, middle of next week. It's here, buddy.
I know, man. I'm going to have to really take advantage of these next few days here. But we're going to be busy. We're going to speak to some more newcomers. As Mike Norvell is so generous to do, he lets us speak to everybody on the roster that's a scholarship player. So Wednesday and Thursday, we'll get to speak to a new batch of newcomers. On Wednesday, it looks like we're just going to get straight prep stars. We'll get Jonathan Daniels, the offensive lineman out of Pine Forest High School in Pensacola. We'll get Jamori Flagg from Miami, Didi Holmes from Gonzaga Prep up in Washington, D.C., and Manasseh Aititi, who played ball out in California and is a native of the Democratic Republic of the Congo, Kinshasa, which I think that's where the Rumble in the Jungle was, if I'm not mistaken.
No kidding. All right.
I think it was
good
Kinshasa.
trivia, buddy.
It was Zaire back in the day. Now it's
All
the
right.
Democratic Republic of the Congo. So we get that Wednesday. Thursday, Cam Riley might be the marquee speaker, if you will. He was a transfer from Auburn, 6'5", linebacker. I think, if I'm not mistaken, in the spring or in the January window, he committed to NC State and was actually up in Raleigh for the spring portion of the season. But
I don't know if he did anything there. He committed to them, but I don't know if he actually went there in the spring.
Okay.
He committed and then kind of pulled his name back out of the portal. And they came before say, I'm not to check on that. I'm not sure he actually ever did anything at NC State.
No. And then we'll also get Jake Weinberg, the much accolades kicker, Denaz White, and Amari Williams, who I think was the last commitment high school wise for Florida State. Didn't realize he went to the Benjamin School, home of Jordan Travis. So get some of the new blood, and then obviously a transfer. I guess Cam Riley's probably going to get the most interest, I would think, Ira, from these two batches of interviews that we'll have later this week.
He's intriguing. I think there's been a lot of questions about the linebacker position with Tatum Bethune and Kalen DeLoach both leaving, and you're basically kind of rebuilding a little bit. You got DJ Lundy back, but most fans are not like over the moon about DJ Lundy. So there's questions at that position. You got the young guys, Blake Nicholson, Justin Cryer, and some of those guys. If Cam Riley could step right in and be the guy and be one of the top 2 or 3 guys, it would be huge for them. But it's really a question mark. And from what I understand, the coaching staff, when they were recruiting Cam Riley out of the portal, they were like, listen, man, we're not going to guarantee you a starting job just because you've been a starter before. And he had a weird career at Auburn. I think he had 3 defensive coordinators in 3 years. And so he's never really had a system to get into. 2 years ago, he was a starter. And then last year they bring in a new staff again and he loses his starting job and is a backup. It'll be interesting to see, how quickly he adapts to, does he take to Randy Shannon, Adam Fuller, this staff, this scheme? If he does, man, he has played a ton of college football. It would be great to plug him in there, but you just don't know for sure because his career was kind of up and down at Auburn.
But, we've seen this story before, right? We've seen guys that might have been having that kind of up and down career elsewhere. Then for whatever reason, they come to Florida State and Tallahassee and it all kind of clicks. Don't want to maybe put that much pressure on him since he did miss out on the spring, but he's played so much football. You would think it's just a matter of, all right, he's been able to probably figure out the terminology the last few weeks, month or so. And then now it's just about going on the field and applying it. I would not bet against the guy that's played that much football figuring it out. Any of these other true freshmen you think, Ira, might be like dark horse guys to not crack a post 2024 top 40 if we did one, but maybe find a way into either somehow working into the rotation or a guy that you probably will see at practice as the season progresses and you're like, wow, he might be something.
Yeah, I'm real hopeful. Didi Holmes is a guy that I really like to see. I just want to see him. The young defensive tackles, man, it's hard. I mean, it's Denaz White and Jamori Flagg. I mean, those guys are, they were not superstars anyway. It's not like they were 5-star guys, but that position is just tough. But on the edge, man, if you've got, if you're a big time player, you can play. And we'll see. He was a 4-star recruit. I don't think he's probably not. When you look at his size, I don't know that I don't know. He may be twitchy like Brian. I just don't know enough about him. I didn't watch his huddle tape to get a good feel for it. But man, that is a position. If you come in, if you're athletically ready to play, him and is Amari Williams, the other guy.
Correct.
That's a position where a guy could come in and play some early. Obviously, you're not expecting any of them to be Brian Burns, but you can do it as a freshman.
I'm really interested to see how Jonathan Daniels looks because I think at one point Daniels might have been a 5-star, either consensus or on the On3 network, and I don't know if I don't think he was able to hold on to it, but obviously to garner that kind of distinction, they saw something in him. So curious to see how that works out. And obviously, freshman, it's always tough to make your way, but might be a guy that we see him out there in some practice situations where you start thinking, all right, this is something that Alex Atkins can kind of build around.
You know what? You know what I wish they would do? Excuse me. When they drop somebody down from 5-star to 4-star, like there should be a like a challenge. Like when I was in middle school band, Aslan, you could challenge somebody. I played trombone, and if there's a better trombone player, I could be like, I want to challenge him for first chair, second chair, whatever it is. Yeah. They should have to do that. Like if they're going to they should call the guy up or his coach and say, hey, listen, we're about to take Jonathan's 5th star. Yeah. But if he meets us in Atlanta, we're going to bring 3 defensive ends that are all 5 stars. If he can handle them, we're going to keep it his 5-star, and then we're going to take it away from somebody else. It's pretty, I know look, man, these ratings, they flow all the time, but it just seems harsh for a guy to be a 5-star for a lot of the process and then just lose it arbitrarily.
Hey, I don't know who would say no. I like it. I like it a lot. We got to maybe like get Delta involved or some like American Airlines. We got to get like a national carrier to fly these guys around and make these things figure out. But I like it.
We can do it now.
Away. You just take it away without giving me a shot to.
Or bring, when which quarterback was I feel like there was one of the quarterbacks lost a star late. Luke got a star late.
Yeah.
No complaints there. But if a quarterback loses a star, maybe I feel like they've had a quarterback recently lose a star late. And if you're going to do that, fly him up and like put up some targets. Let's get one more good look at him.
Yeah. So this dated June of last year. Daniels, he was a 5-star offensive tackle at that time. So, all he's got to do though is just prove it against Marvin Jones Jr., Patrick Payton, our guy Lolahea. So Tomiwa, piece of cake, man, piece of cake, and then we'll give you your 5-star back. It will surely be deserved at that point. Folks out there watching, we appreciate it. Hit the thumbs up. Let us know who you thought might have been able to represent Florida State at ACC kickoff next week, and maybe who you're looking forward to hearing from either on Wednesday or Thursday when we speak to this latest batch of newcomers. Right now, SEC Media Days is going on over in Dallas. Ira, real big power move by Greg Sankey and the gang to set up shop in their newest, shiniest state, if you will, for expanding the SEC footprint. Haven't really paid a lot of attention to what's been going on out there, but I did watch Get Up on ESPN earlier today, and they had Nick Saban on, and they were talking to Saban just about the expanded playoff and whether he thinks it's going to be a diluted field. He actually said like he's pretty much in favor. He likes the fact that it is going to make so many more fan bases engaged late in the season. He did have this line about like, we always responded really well to losses at Alabama, but, we really only would lose 1, maybe 2 games. But he did say, if the NFL had their druthers about them, they probably would want every team to be 8-8 going into the final week of the season because every fan base would be engaged. I was kind of surprised to hear him say that because I thought maybe he would think that this would actually, take away from the importance of the regular season. He is, though, I think he might be more of an SEC network employee than an ESPN employee right now, Ira, because he did say that he thinks that they're getting away from rewarding the best teams. He thinks that it was always about rewarding the 4 best teams, and they're no longer going to be able to do that with the way the playoff has included conference champions because not all conferences are created equal. Was disappointed to hear him say that, but I don't know how much you can maybe disagree at this point in time.
Yeah, I don't know, man. I have a tough time with him. I'm gonna have a tough time with him in this role because it's just gonna be very difficult to know who he's serving. Does he believe what he's saying? Did you see his 7-minute speech that everybody's sharing on social media the other night from the ESPYs or whatever it was?
No.
There was a clip of him talking. He got some award and he spoke for 6-7 minutes, and everybody's sharing on social media is this, just this great message. And it is a good message, but basically one of the themes is, maybe the biggest theme is that, he's getting this award, but really it's about the thousands of people that helped him. And he remembers when he was young and he was told that the most important thing you do isn't how many games you win, but how you make people feel. And it's like, yeah, man, okay, that sounds cool. But your 40 years of your career was not making people feel good about, I mean, I'm saying? Like, that's just it's a nice message. And I think it would work for Mike Norvell because, the way he handles himself. But Nick Saban, man, I've watched him behind the scenes. There are a million stories about him behind the scenes, how he treats fans, how he treated coworkers or people at the Miami Dolphins, people behind the scenes, assistants. I mean, the stories are endless, and that's fine. You've won it all. You're the greatest college football coach of all time. Enjoy it. But now we have to sit here and listen to you say that it was all about how you made people feel. That's a tough one, man. I'm going to struggle with Nick Saban in this role, I think.
Yeah. It was a split for me. I mean, I like the fact that, he seemed to be receptive to an expanded playoff because, at first, Corey and I would talk about it and we just kind of lamented, growing up, like every Saturday just was life or death. Like you could not lose a game. Yeah, and now it's like, we lost. It's okay, which might be good for business. So we won't lose. We won't have to fear people like tuning out the season. If Florida State like loses 2 games in the middle of the season, they'll still be alive. But I do wish, we could give him like the sodium pentothal or whatever the truth serum is and just be like, Nick, what would you have done though if you were the head coach at Utah and your team went 13-0 and you got left out for a team that lost the game? Because I get it. You want to talk about who's best versus most deserving. I want to take him at face value that, he's being as objective as he possibly can as a ball coach, but they're also opportunistic, man. I think if the shoe was on the other foot, he would kick and scream about, hey, we played our conference. We played our schedule. We won all of our games. We play in a tough conference. We don't get enough respect versus the whole SEC kind of talking point about they're the best. And, they stack games on top of games that nobody else can handle, which was a bummer to hear. But
they're all at the end of the day, they're all going to be self-serving, and we would do the same thing, I'm sure. But like when Jimbo was here, he would just talk about how he knows how great he knows the SEC and the ACC is not any different, and blah blah blah. Then he goes to A&M, and all of a sudden the SEC is the major leagues, and everything else is a different. Well, you're crazy if you even consider anybody else. So that's that's what they all do. But like I said, you're adding him into this platform to be seen as kind of like an expert who's not affiliated. But is he not affiliated? I mean, is he not just going to do whatever Greg Sankey and I don't know. It's going to be hard to untie him unless he takes him. Now he could, if he takes some stances early on, I would recommend maybe early on show that he can be impartial and look for some opportunities maybe to speak in a different way or promote other teams. But until he does that, man, it's just going to be hard to not see him as just a mouthpiece for the SEC.
He did pick who he thinks is going to win the SEC, and he thinks it's going to be Texas versus Georgia. So he's already gone ahead against his former employer, which he still has an office in their stadium. So we'll see how that goes over when he shows up. Taking questions here again on the Monday Smash presented by State Farm agent Russ Voorhis. Check him out, russvorhis.com, 1S in Voorhis. A lot of people angsty about this one from last week, Ira, and it's carrying over into this week. Brett Taylor making a plea to the public. Folks, and we all agree that the talk about FSU to the Big 12 has no basis in fact and will never, ever, ever happen. That's strong.
Yeah, man, I don't know what to tell you, Brett. I wish I could say that, and I don't believe the Big 12 is going to happen, but I can't. I mean, I've just seen enough of this stuff to know that you can't ever say never, 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 ever. I can't. You can. It's just not. That's not what I do. Just because I've seen so many things that you didn't expect to happen. So, so I wouldn't. I can't rule it out. I think it is a fallback plan. I think it's not going to happen. But for me to say there's no way, here's the thing, and this is the reason I bring it up. Like some different scenarios I could tell you about. When Jimbo Fisher flirted with LSU the first time, and they ended up staying with Les Miles, like they couldn't pull the power brokers wouldn't let them fire Les Miles. It was governor, whoever. They couldn't fire Les Miles that year because they felt like they didn't have the support, and they basically told Jimbo, next year we're going to do it. And so that next year, I'm convinced, Jimbo's last year, I'm convinced, or the year before, 2016, that he knew he was leaving. He thought he for sure had that job. And so if I was talking to somebody like in that situation, I would have said, oh, man, he's going to LSU. They want him. He wants to be there. It's going to happen. But then circumstances changed again. Other power brokers were like, we don't want to pay him that much money. and the deal ended up falling through. So my point is, like, there are variables in all this. Like the powers that be of the the Big Ten or the SEC may have already kind of indicated to Florida State, you're in. But until it happens, man, I can't ever say never. So I apologize to Brett. I just can't do it.
And I saw somebody comment on the tribal council, I think over on warchant.com. And I mean, it made sense from a very elementary basic level, which is like when you're in business, like you listen to every offer. So like you try to get as many voices, as much courage, as much interest as you possibly can. So, and again, Ross Dellinger, I think, who reported this last week, even came back the following day and was trying to, I think, even kind of, clear up the air about, he doesn't think that Florida State is interested in going to the Big 12. It would be like an absolute like plan C. Cause I think when he went through it, it was like, obviously they want to get to the SEC or the Big 10. Maybe if they can't, then they would try to figure out a way to rework the ACC and stick into it. And then like, it was like at that point, then maybe like the Big 12 would be like the absolute like option Z in that sort of situation. So, it was probably worth talking about for one day in the middle of July, but everybody's so set on either going to the SEC or the Big 10 that anything that's not that feels like a distraction.
And the problem for Ross, and Ross is a great reporter. He's done a tremendous job. He's got a big name, and we ran a story aggregating his quotes, is we didn't aggregate the part that he said he thought it was a possibility. We aggregated the part where he said they've been talking to the Big 12, that they've had conversations. So it's kind of hard to come back the next day and say, I was just saying, like, it was, just in general, which is fine, except you said, I watched the video, you said that they had conversations. So that's a little bit different. But yeah, man, it's a I don't think that that's the plan. I don't think that's the plan. And the one thing I would say here is there's one comment I've seen a lot of people make is there's no way Florida State would have sued to get out of the ACC, done all this stuff to go to the Big 12. And I agree 100%. Like that's definitely not. But if something happens to where they get told to wait, or something happens where they can't get in when they think they're going to go in, and this is all hypothetical, could I see a scenario where the Big 12 said, hey, we're going to give you this much more than we're giving everybody else because we want you so badly in this conference? And if you're Florida State and you say, okay, we left the ACC to get more money, and you're going to give us more money, and we get to play a Big 12 schedule, which I might prefer to an SEC schedule in terms of level of competition and getting into that playoff, I don't know that it like you'd be like, no, there's no way we would do that. Plus, Florida State can't. And one more thing I'll say, Florida State can't come out and dispel any of this. Like I've reached out to some people at Florida State and said, I'm not asking you if you want to confirm that you're talking to Big 12, great, but I'm not even asking that. Can you shoot this down? And they can't even really do that because you don't know what your options are going to be. Right. And I don't know if you remember when you weren't covering FSU at the time you left, but when this was bubbling up in 2012 or whenever, and Eric Barron had sent an email to constituents, like people would email Eric Barron, the former president, and ask questions about conferences. And he fired off emails ripping the Big 12 about how it's beneath us academically. That's not where we want to be. Well, it's kind of hard if you do that to then turn around and say, maybe we're considering the Big 12. And some people wanted them to consider the Big 12. So it's just a weird situation. I don't think it's on the table, but I'm not going to be the one that says never because I just don't know.
And I don't know if I want to be in a foxhole with Brett. Brett's changed his mind already. He went from never, ever, ever to, okay, Ira, I agree with that. You can't say never.
Brett's
the words of a great movie line. So you're saying there's a chance.
He's trying to let me off the hook. We appreciate it, Brett.
Yeah, thanks, Brett. Appreciate that for sure. We got a question from our guy, R. Wilmer. When do we go straight to a 16-team playoff, skip the talk of 14 so Greg Sankey can lobby for 8 to 12 SEC teams in it? I think Heather Dinich said that if they would have had the 12-team playoff last year, there would have been like 10 SEC teams in it. Or maybe she said 10 SEC and Big 10 teams in it.
Yeah.
I don't know. It hurts, man. It's frustrating.
Yeah, man. The reality is, and this is one of the reasons beyond the money, another reason you'd like to be in those conferences is you get more at bats. You get more shells or balls to play with in the shell game. Because if you're in the ACC, you're going to have to win the ACC. Maybe you finish second. like you went undefeated and lose the AC championship game. But man, there's not going to be a lot of entries from the Big 12 and the ACC other than conference champions. So it's another reason it would be nice to get into one of those conferences.
Brett adds SEC in the Big 10. We'll get every at-large team unless Notre Dame goes 11-1 or 12-0. I saw I saw Bruce Feldman saying to take the under. He said to take the under on 10.5 wins for Notre Dame and take the over on Florida State 9.5.
All right.
So that is out there, everybody. That is indeed out there if you're interested in it. Take your questions. Monday Smash, State Farm agent Russ Voorhis. Subscribe to warchant.com. Welcome in. YouTube subscribers, welcome on in. Obviously, ACC kickoff going on next week, but the MLB draft day 2 kicked into high gear at around 2:00 today, Ira. Yesterday, 2 first-round picks for Florida State. Homegrown guys, James Tibbs III and Cam Smith going back-to-back. Tibbs to San Francisco, and then Cam Smith to Chicago. The Cubbies, that is. North side? I think north side, right? Yeah, south side's the Sox.
Yeah.
On Wednesday, it's Monday, everybody. Aslan has no dates. Without Corey, without the show, I lose the compass. I don't have my North Star. But 4 players selected on Monday's draft. Marco Dinges, 4th rounder, as was Jaime Ferrer. Pitcher Carson Dorsey, 7th rounder to none other than Ira's Baltimore Orioles.
That's
Gavin Adams, who came here with very high regard but was not able to perform this season because of an injury. He actually went 8th round to the Pittsburgh Pirates, Jeff Cameron's favorite team. So felt really good coming out of Omaha about what they were going to probably lose, what they were going to return, Ira. But I thought like Carson Dorsey and Marco Dinges were part of the future at Florida State. I no longer feel that way. But congrats to them. That's awesome.
I can't, Marco Dinges, that would be remarkable. It's over $500,000 slot, 4th round pick without even a position. We were talking to Corey and I were in the press box. I can't remember if you were there at that moment or not, but a scout came up to the press box late in the season and he was asking us about Dinges and he's like, man, he's a tough sign with, he's a tough scout without a position because he was a DH all season. And he's played catcher, and they think he could be an outfielder, but he hasn't done anything on the college level at this level. And they don't care. His bat is so good. He's athletic enough that they took him in the 4th round. So, yeah, man, it's hard to imagine. You just in the longer we all know, the longer you go, the less leverage you have. And so, you think that he's gone. Dorsey, same deal. You just know he was a junior and is a 7th round pick. And I think his slot, I want to say was 250 something, around 250. So, again, it's not out of the realm that some of these guys could stay, but it seems likely that they'll go. They also lost, I think, 4 recruits, not lost, excuse me. They had 4 recruits get drafted, and 1 or 2 of them likely will stay. We'll see how it plays out. But yeah, there's still 10 more rounds tomorrow. But yeah, they've got hit pretty good. You think of the heart of that lineup, other than, a couple pieces has been pretty much decimated.
Yeah. Max Williams, your leadoff guy, but you lost 2, 3, 4, 5, Cantu 6. Yeah. So you lost 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. But hey, D1 baseball still got Florida State projected to make it back to Omaha next year, Ira.
Let's go. It's going to be a different looking team. And it should have great arms. I think that's going to be it's going to have great arms. And every coach I talk to always says, like, whenever they talk about Link Jarrett, Link's going to produce an offense. So if he does what he does and you've got really good pitching, then yeah, they should be right back there.
Awesome.
Contact Russ Voorhis for an auto quote today.
Monday Smash presented by State Farm agent Russ Voorhis. Visit his website, 2 S's in Russ, 1 S in Voorhis, RussVorhis.com. Got you covered. Alabama, Georgia, Florida, 2 offices over there on the First Coast. Go check them out. Big time Florida State fan supporter. Noles helping Noles. Do it, everybody. R. Wilmer with a very delicate question here, which sometimes we get clarification on before we go into the season because Mike Norvell, again, so generous with his time and his treasure, pays for lunch and feeds all of us before spring starts, before fall camp starts. Not sure if we'll get that same sort of luxury this season, but he usually kind of clarifies where he stands injury-wise going into camp, whether it be spring camp or preseason camp. R. Wilmer wondering, actually, that's the same question from last time. I didn't save the proper one I wanted to pop up on here, but he did say, taboo question, and I understand if we can't answer it, but any updates on injured players returning, maybe their dates of return? I don't think we can go that in depth, but it feels like big picture, feels like everything's okay. Like Malik Benson was the big concern coming out of the spring game, but we saw photos of him out there performing drills and stuff. So that was the only real scare it felt like that I remember.
Yeah, there were a couple. I think there was a lineman. There was like 3 or 4, but Mike Norvell came out afterwards and said none of them were. All of them should be ready for camp. So we expect all of them to be ready for camp. The biggest injury during the spring, obviously, was Destin Hill, a wide receiver. That was devastating. He's expected to miss this season. I guess you never know with the modern miracle, the human body. Maybe there's a chance maybe at the end of the season, but probably next spring is when we'll see him. But yeah, there's nothing else that coming out of the spring that was like really super concerning, and I haven't heard anything else since then. But yeah, like Aslan said, if we don't have that pre-practice luncheon that we usually do, and it may be tough this year because of kickoff being on Monday and practice starting that week, I'm sure the first day he'll address a lot of that.
And the fact that Josh Farmer is going to be the representative at ACC kickoff, that's probably a good sign as well for him. So.
Yeah, he was a guy that didn't do a whole lot. There were several guys that didn't do much in the spring. Robert Scott, Josh Farmer, several other guys as well. But guys who've been in the system, have played a lot of football, and the perception was that they were all going to be fine for preseason camp. Now, I say that, I would just say this: don't panic if some guys aren't doing much the first few days or the first couple days in pads. You always got to remember that if a player has been in the system for 3, 4, 5 years and they miss some practices, especially early in camp, try not to freak out, because sometimes they have those guys in a little bit later time frame because they don't need all of the basic stuff that maybe the younger players do.
Let's go to our guy, Jim McGroat. Or maybe it's JLM McGroat? Yeah, JLM. Or JL McGroat. Sorry. Glasses. You know how it goes. Maybe splitting hairs, but as I recently heard it explained, being a conference champion does not guarantee you a spot. The verbiage is highest ranked conference champions. That is correct. It's a 7+5 model. So it's 7 at large, 5 highest ranked conference champions. So SEC and Big Ten, obviously whoever wins those conferences will be 2 of those 5. But I guess there is a really crazy world.
Yeah.
Where maybe like if Oklahoma State runs a table and UCF, or not UCF because they're in the Big 12 as well, but if like a Sun Belt team, like if a James Madison has another
Memphis
season, although they lost their head coach, and then Florida State or Clemson wins the ACC and if they win it as a 10-3 team, they would not probably be ranked higher than a 13-0 Oklahoma State team or a 13-0, I don't know, Arkansas State team. It's the only Sun Belt team I could pull off my head. But just it feels like one of those improbable scenarios that you tried to save me last year, Ira, when we were talking about what happens if there's a 3-way tie atop the ACC. You're like, it's not going to happen. But every single day on the show, I'd be like, but and guess what, everybody? It didn't happen. I don't see that situation happening. But if you want something to worry about, everybody, I guess do that.
Yeah, and he's just pushing back, and we appreciate it. The idea, because I was saying before that, if you win the conference, you're in. Yeah, that's technically it's not true. You'd like to think if Florida State's 10 wins and they win the conference that they're going to get in. Whereas if they're 10 wins, if they're 10-2 and they don't win the conference, or 10-3, I don't know that they do get in. I think you might see these 9 win SEC teams, maybe even 8 win SEC teams get in. I mean, you just got left out when you were 13-0. So I don't know that anything's off the table.
Tom Kirkpatrick, pivoting us back to the wonderful world of realignment. When you guys are around recruits, are they asking about conference realignment? I think I saw Matt Lasser in the chat. He's on the beach, but he's still always involved. So, Matt, if you want to hop in and post a comment, you can. I mean, anecdotally, Ira, when I was in Nashville the other month for the On3 Elite event, which was really awesome, which had every pretty much elite recruit there in the country. When talking about Florida State, it never felt like ACC uncertainty factor into their decision making, but I can't speak for all the kids that Florida State recruits and wins or loses out on.
It's definitely a concern in general, but not necessarily because of what's going on right now, but they constantly over the last several years, when they're recruiting kids and they talk about SEC schools, they talk about them in a different way than they talk about the ACC schools. And so that definitely is a perception that they're constantly fighting. I will say this, I do know that some of these other sports, it's going to have a huge, and people care more about football, but some of these other sports, it's going to have a big impact as well. I mean, for example, I don't think that, baseball recruits are going to love the idea if it's the Big Ten. I mean, that's not, if you want to be a big time college baseball player and show your wares to the MLB draft, I don't know that you want to be in the Big Ten. So there, it is something that's out there and guys pay attention to it. I don't know that it's a constant source of talk right now about the uncertainty, but if Florida State's in the SEC, it 100% would help them in terms of football recruiting.
Sometimes we try to hang on to any kind of quote we can from a recruit that makes you feel good about like what they feel about Florida State. And I do wonder, now that we kind of talk about this out loud, I do wonder when they say stuff like, "Oh, I was so surprised by like how awesome it was." Right. I wonder how much of that is like the whole, like the SEC universe just being the center of everything. And that it's like hard to believe that there could be a school outside of that bubble that has the same level of commitment and dedication to competing. So
how could they not? I mean,
conscious way they just talk about.
How could they not, man? Like, think about the world. These guys, these recruits that are 18 years old or 17 years old or 19 years old now, the world they've lived in is that it's the SEC and everybody else. It's between the national championships and then the way ESPN just forcing it down your throat at every turn. How could they not feel that way? It's that's a challenge for sure.
Matt also piped in for the podcast audience on the replay, saying that from what he's been interacting with recruits, they do not, at least from what they tell us. I'm sure some have asked, and then he's telling me how to do my job and saying it would be a good question for Norvell in the next press conference or something. So
I think he could be the one that asks the question.
Yeah, now, you're going to be in Charlotte, Matt, right? You're going to have your sticks playing NCAA 25. You can hop in there and ask away some questions there. So Antonio Baker adds, if they're in the Big Ten or the SEC, it's going to help them recruiting wise. I mean, that's for me, Ira. I mean, I still think the Big Ten just seems to make more sense from a very elementary, I only have 7 brain cells left stance of like, you're kind of in a legal embattlement here with a television partner of ESPN's, whereas like Fox, you haven't, maybe upset them at all. So they probably have an easier way to hop over onto their lifeboat to get out of it. But I would prefer to be in the SEC professionally, personally. And we always joke whenever I do a video with Michael Langston, our recruiting analyst, about when they talked from a guy from Alabama or Mississippi or Louisiana, I'm always just like, all right, man. Okay, sure. They're really thinking about it. But that's the one thing where if like Florida State was in the SEC, that opens, that kicks the door open. I mean, the door is always open because you're Florida State. You've got that logo on your chest if you're a coach, but like the door gets kicked open in those schools, in those states, if they make it to the SEC, which I think would pay much more dividends than getting, more involved in a national footprint game with recruiting in the Big Ten country, if you will.
Yeah, no, it definitely would help. I still think it's going to be hard to get a kid out of Alabama. If Alabama or Auburn wants a kid in Alabama, even if you're in the SEC, it's going to be hard to get him out of there. I think same probably Louisiana, same maybe sometimes in the Mississippi schools, just because there's so many things that can be provided for their family if they're, and that's what you don't really get in Florida. And I think part of the problem for Florida is, it's more of a transient state. It's a more divided state. There's a lot of pro teams. You just don't have that same level of passion. So at least it's concentrated. So it's hard for those kind of pressures to be there, I think, the way they are in some of those schools in the Alabamas and Ole Misses, plus in Mississippi, plus the high school coaches here don't make as much money and they can factor into it. So I think there's some factors there, but no, yeah, being in the SEC, I think would help. The other thing I would say, and you touched on earlier with Greg Sankey and the SEC media days is going on right now. And I guess, everybody's going to parse every word that Greg Sankey says. he was asked about the ACC's uncertainty, and he was asked whether or not it's something he pays attention to. He started out by saying, our league still is happy at 16, but he came back later and said, I've also been instructed by presidents to make sure I don't get us in any litigation by doing any conversations before anybody's out or a free agent. And then he also said, somebody asked, well, what happens if the ACC does destabilize and some of these schools break free? And he said, well, we're definitely paying attention. So you can look at that. I saw some people putting out the first part where he said, we're happy at 16 teams. I saw other people saying, we're paying attention. So, that's probably as good as you're going to get if you're, trying to read the tea leaves, is that he didn't shut the door on it. But I don't know if he would under any circumstances anyway.
Like you're like my weather vane for how I need to feel about, realignment. I mean, how much of your opinions and you're kind of forecasting in your mind, Aaron, and you don't have to, I don't want you to empty everything you're thinking about here, but how much of it kind of changes on a week to week, month to month basis? The one hearing that I went to at the Leon County Courthouse like a month or so ago, Florida State's not messing around here in this whole lawsuit and in these hearings. And it almost, especially here in the state of Florida, where they're going to, they have a favorable ear in Judge Cooper. They have a favorable backdrop being in the state of Florida, being in the Capitol. And part of me wonders, how audacious will they be? Will there be a point where they think we really think we don't have to settle? I'm sure that ideally they get out this thing scot-free, but they probably assume, all right, we'll meet somewhere in the middle. We'll pay an exit fee. We might have to do some sort of buyback of the grant of rights, on a payment plan. But when I was there, I'm like, what if they just think that they can really just get off scot-free with this thing? So they might actually push this thing and redline it as much as they possibly can before they want to talk settlement and things of that nature, and arbitration, if you will.
I think the problem with that theory, I could see it in normal circumstances, but in this situation, they want to get out yesterday. So for them to win it in the courtroom, that's going to be a long drawn out process. And that's what, even at the beginning of this process and throughout time, when you talk to attorneys, all Noles on our boards and just different attorneys that are, friends of the site and that we talk to, they're all like, people need to understand what you're getting into. If you're getting into a civil lawsuit over hundreds of millions of dollars, this is not going to be a quick process. And my point was, we've had this conversation, I do think that Florida State wants to push the issue to make it as uncomfortable as possible, to get the SEC and the ESPN to say, you know what, this is uncomfortable. We don't want to release all this information. Like just last week, the news broke that ESPN is going to have to turn over, or the SEC or the ACC is going to have to turn over those ESPN contracts. That's not something ESPN wants. That's not something the ACC wants. So the more you kind of make those pushes and kind of make this thing uncomfortable, you feel like there's a better chance that they'll come settle. So I got your point. If it went to the end, Judge Cooper, and you picked up on it in the hearing you went to, and I've been to 2 or 3 of those hearings too, he is definitely sympathetic to Florida State's cause. And I've talked to other attorneys who are, will say, yeah, man, judges do not like the idea of companies putting in punitive damages to break a contract. That's just something they don't like. This is unique because you're talking about huge entities that aren't really going to get hornswoggled. If they did it to you or me, the judge would definitely side on our side before we had to pay some crazy exit fee. But because you're talking about huge institutions, they're maybe not as lenient, but he seems sympathetic. But man, you just can't drag this out too long. They want to get out. They want to become a free agent, and the only way to do that is to get their rights back.
Right on. There you go, everybody. There's your realignment talk. I'm always sharing the best information. Matt Lacerre jumped in the conversation earlier. He's actually out in Texas, and he called with Dalen McCutcheon. How fortuitous, how serendipitous was that for the old Warchant.com banner? Shout out to Matt. Florida State's recruiting has been picking up steam here of late, Ira. I know there was a miss, obviously, with Tavion Wallace. Got everybody a little bit concerned, but when you kind of step back and look at the way things are going right now, while we're still, I think, in a bit of a dead period, if I'm not mistaken, here for probably another week, maybe. For Florida State to be top 10 right now in recruiting high school players, that's pretty solid. I mean, I wonder if you have a pulse for what people are hoping for, or is sanity starting to kind of maybe wash over the fan base after landing an elite recruit, pulling him out of the state of Texas?
I mean, it should to a degree. I mean, this has been a great 3 or 4 weeks. They've had, I think, 8 commitments over the last 3 weeks. They're up to number 7 in the country. And the schools they're up there with are all the schools above them all have several more commitments than they do. Florida State still only has like 14, 15 commitments. So they've got plenty of room to go if they want to go more high school on the high school side. But at the end of the day, look, last year they were top 10. This time last year, coming out of the summer, we were thinking that Florida State may end up as a top 5 recruiting class. If they got KJ Bolden, if they got Armando Blunt, if they got, there were some 5-star type guys that they were either had commitments from or were in the mix from. And you felt like, okay, this could be a top 5 class. And then they end up falling out of the top 10. So they're 9 now.
I guess.
Yesterday they were 7.
A&M stepped up their game or something, or Clemson dropped the bag.
Yesterday they were 7. So top 10 solid, but I also understand the people who are like, call me in December, because this time last year it looked like they were going to be a top 5 class and they ended up outside the top 10.
I don't know if you guys can see. I tried to highlight it. Looks a little bit funky here, but I think when it comes to like average value of player, and not talking about like financially, but just the way that they're kind of ranked. I mean, they would be, I think, like a top 5 team.
I think they're 4th. If you go to that 4th, I think that they've been is average in the average rating. They had been 4th.
Yeah, so they're 6th now in that. Which, hey, that's top 10. That's solid. So, and obviously there's other guys out there. I think Josh Petty, that offensive lineman, will be committing in August. So that would be one that would really be able to help out the bottom line there if you're scoreboard watching. But again, no one ever won a national title in July, everybody. So we'll see how it goes once practice starts. And we're not that far away from practice starting, Ira. And more question marks, or do you feel pretty good about where Florida State is going to be because so many of the new guys did come there in the spring? Or do you still think there's going to be a little bit of a learning curve or some adjustment as this team lost its heart and soul to the NFL draft, which is the way you want it to be, and they're having to reload in such a drastic way? Do you think there's more questions, or do you think there's a fair amount of stability going into preseason camp?
I think there's a stability from the standpoint of, like, I think they know who most of the guys that they're going to be counting on are. There are some wild cards because guys who came in after the spring, Cam Riley's one of them. There are a few of those guys who, Jacob Rizzi, and there's a few guys that could be in the mix that they didn't plan on at the end of the spring. But for the most part, I think at the end of the spring, I think they had a good feel for who your top 3 or 4 safeties were, who your top 4 or 5 corners were, go down the list. So I don't think there's like a lot of internal questions, but I still don't know if we're going to solve all of these questions or really know all of these answers until they start playing games, man. Because the thing to me, and I'm probably making too much of a deal about this, but I'm kind of stuck on the idea because it's something that's new to me, is, you still don't know what guys can do until you've seen them play in game situations. And so, like, Marvin Jones looked incredible to me in the spring. I mean, he's 6'5", 250 plus and runs like a deer. I mean, he is explosive, dynamic, but I also don't know like what he looks like in the 3rd or 4th quarter of a football game where he's been on the field for 60 snaps. That's the stuff. I don't know that. Earl Little, I think, is a phenomenal athlete. Got a chance to be a really good football player. Looked great in shells or in his non-contact jersey. But again, like, if a play goes poorly, he comes downhill and he gets run over or he blows an assignment, how does he handle that? How does he react to that? How does he respond, Aslan? Like, those are things that, to me, those are the big unknowns to me, but I don't know that we can answer any of those until we actually see the games.
I can't disagree with what you're saying, but I just feel like, we've seen this coaching staff instill, a culture where these guys really are so resilient. And it's guys like Braden Fisk, like year one. I mean, it wasn't even here for like 365 days and completely bought into everything. I guess we'll find out just how special a guy like that is Not to say that if Marvin Jones Jr. ends up being great, that takes away from the greatness of Braden Fisk. But, the thing from last year was that it just felt like you hit 3 sevens on the slot machine like 20 times in a row when you're bringing all these new guys and it all worked out. But I won't say that was happenstance or chance. I just feel like they figured out a way. Mike Norvell is so passionate. He's so just dedicated to what he does and the belief in his system and the guys that he's brought to this program that it kind of makes it easy to pick yourself up when you do face those kind of adverse moments. And I know you weren't saying like in a literal sense, but I think Marvin Jones Jr. He's probably been waiting for this moment for 3 years though, right?
Right. And I think in our Wilmer in the chat points out, his fit and culture and that kind of, that should make you feel good about it. But this is just my personal thing from watching college football or covering college football for 30 plus years is I like to have seen it before. So if you go back a year ago, I was not the biggest proponent of Braden Fisk going into the season because I had never seen him do it. Like in the spring, he was still coming off his shoulder surgery.
You love Trey Benson though, man. Like you saw Trey Benson before he did anything.
Trey Benson to me to me, running back's a little bit different also. Like to me, running back is, man, you've got the athletic ability. There's a good chance it's going to work. Defensive positions, man, there's just, I don't know. For some reason I view them differently. Like how do you respond to, just getting punched in the mouth and the when you're tired, you rotate running backs. You don't rotate defensive ends if they're big time guys quite as much. So it just that kind of stuff is what I want to see. But I'm gonna always be like I didn't believe Keon was going to be what Keon was. Like I knew he was really good at Michigan State. I did not expect him to be what he was against LSU. I didn't expect Braden Fisk to be what he was late in the season. Based on what we saw before. So my nature is going to be a little bit reluctant until I've seen guys do it. And now you're on a team where you've got a bunch of guys who I haven't seen do it. So for that reason, I'm going to be a little bit like wait and see. I want to see them on the field in a game, but I've said all along, I also think this may be the most talented team. I think it is the most talented team he's had. I think it's more talented than last year. I just need to see how they actually play.
Oh. I mean, I guess if we're talking, maybe about 1 through 85. Yeah. But I'd rather have, 1 through 20, what they had last year than what they have 1 through 20 this year. But again, that, more talented.
No. I'm not even saying 1 through 20. I mean, think about, and I know I've heard you and Corey have this conversation before. I think this team, when I say talented, I'm not saying they're going to play better. I'm just saying like top line talent. I think so. Last year, Renardo Green was a starter and he was a great college football player corner. I think Azaria Thomas probably has more upside because of his length and probably his overall ability. I may be wrong on that, but I think he might. If you look at the defensive end position, I mean, I think they may have more overall talent across the board at that position. I think you look at, running back, they may have more. I mean, Trey was great, but I think you've got 7 running backs. So this team, I think, is a really talented football team. I just don't know if it's going to play. Last year, I knew they were going to play well because they were so experienced. This year's, to me, there's a few more unknowns.
Yeah. Our guy James B thinks that the receivers will be better than expected. I'm skeptical, Hippo, when it comes to the wide receivers. We'll see how that works out, but I feel like that's something that we'll be able to get a good feel for, Ira. I mean, I think we can see if Malik Benson was able to build on his spring. I think we can see if Hakeem Williams is, at a young age still, only his second year in the program, if he's ready to step up and accept the challenge and the opportunity that he has. And, Ja'Kai Douglas was battling injuries last year. If he's, going to stay healthy and,
Kentron was banged up last year.
Yeah. So I get it, but I still like Johnny Wilson and Keon Coleman a lot. I felt a lot better about them than I do this group, but not to say that they can't surprise me. But where are you at with receivers right now?
Yeah, and that's a position where I would not argue that they're more talented this year. I mean, those two guys were big-time players. I mean, I still can't believe Johnny got drafted as low as he did. I think he's a much higher level talent. Keon was basically a first-round pick, right on the borderline. But
you feel good about them though, Ira, going into the season? I know you said you didn't think Keon was going to be what Keon was, but did you feel better about Johnny, Keon, and question mark than you do like Malik, Hakeem, Ja'Kai?
I was pretty concerned coming out of last spring I thought they really needed to get a receiver. Well, I'll say this: I wasn't concerned, but I didn't feel like they had a great number one receiver. Like people were talking about like Kentron as being like the number one receiver possibly in the spring, and I've just never been the biggest Kentron guy because he just hasn't done a whole lot in games. I mean, he was injured some last year, but he was also out there a lot, and until the Georgia game, really didn't do much. So, we thought Johnny and Kentron were your 1 and 2 based on the spring, but like I said, I was not sold on Kent. I didn't think they would go get Keon, but when they did, I thought that was obviously a good thing to do. This group, I think it's just going to be very different. Like I think, and that it really took me the spring, and then probably to the summer to really kind of wrap my mind around it. I think in the spring, a lot of us were negative. I was pretty negative on the receivers in the spring because you don't see the one-on-one wins
Consistency.
with consistency like you did last year. Keon, if he did a one-on-one, he was probably going to win it. Obviously Johnny won most of his. I mean, you just have more guys who are going to win those one-on-one contested catches. Where I think I've turned the corner a little bit about this receiving core is I don't think it's going to be that kind of passing game. I think it's going to be much more off play action, deep shots, swing passes. It's going to be a lot more. I just don't think you're going to see all the tightly contested catches that they had to have from Johnny and Keon. And so these receivers should be fine in that environment. I don't think Hakeem Williams, for anything I've seen yet, can make the contested catches that those guys made. I haven't seen anything from several of these receivers that they can do that. But I think there may be more deep shots. Jaylen Brown running for – I could see Jaylen Brown and some of these guys, running free, Malik Benson running free for big catches because they've run the ball effectively. So I think it's going to look different. But I think at the end of the day, their numbers may look pretty good, even if they don't have those guys who win all the one-on-one battles.
Yeah, I was trying to pull this up. I was going to talk about it on the podcast at some point with Corey, which, by the way, Wake Up Warchant on hiatus for a week here. Everybody is Corey soaks up the sun. We'll be back for a show Monday when we'll be in Charlotte, originating from ACC Kickoff. But yeah, I've been compensating because I was so down on Jordan Travis for so long. I was the last guy on the bandwagon that I feel like to a certain degree, like so many people are ready to kind of move past and be like, oh, DJ is going to be just fine. Like he might even be better because he's stronger, he's bigger, he's got a stronger arm. And I'm like, whoa. But I get it. I mean, with the speed they have on the outside and looking at the numbers on PFF, because I think Jordan might have completed like maybe 10% more of his passes than DJ. But like when you hammer it out by distance, like Jordan made his bones when you want to talk about completion percentage on throws that were like, 5 yards or less from the line of scrimmage. When it came to those deep shots, those 20+ yard downfield shots, like DJ was on par with Jordan. So that's probably something I'm not factoring in enough.
No, it's a good point. And I think what happened to them last year, I remember talking to some people around the program as last year went on. What happened to them was Keon and Johnny were never blazers in the first place. And then once they were a little bit banged up, deep corners just knew they didn't have to worry about them beating them deep. So they could play them much differently. They used different technique on them, and it made it much harder for Jordan to complete the passes he was completing earlier in the year. So, it's all intertwined. I think the thing with DJ is he does have that huge arm, and they've got speed, and they should have a really good running game. Like they think their running game is going to be much improved from last year. If you have that and those weapons, you could see a scenario where you actually hit a lot of deep passes. So I think this offense could be, it wouldn't shock me if this offense has more 3 and outs than last year's offense did, but it wouldn't surprise me also if they hit a lot more big plays.
Yeah. I'll leave you with this, everybody. Jordan Travis, 18% of his attempts were throws that were 20 or more yards downfield. He completed 31% of those passes. DJ Uiagalelei, 18.5% of his attempts last year were on throws that were 20 or more yards down the field. He completed 43% of those passes, so 12% more. Significant when we're talking about deep shots down the field and just how much that can affect and turn around a game. So some food to digest on. That's a wrap for the Monday Smash presented by State Farm agent Russ Vorhis. Again, don't forget, next week, ACC kickoff. Be prepared. Join warchant.com. Use the promo code FSU1, all together, no space, FSU1. 2 months of premium access for $1. What's going to be going on between now and ACC kickoff over at the Ultimate Seminoles Sports Source, Ira Schoffel?
I'll have the last couple installments of my stories on the strength and conditioning staff. I've got a story about Lanier Coleman, who's the biggest dude on the strength and conditioning staff. Wow. We love Lanier Coleman. You got to stay on Lanier's good side. You don't want to be on his bad side. As a huge human being, that'll be. I'm probably planning on running that in the morning. Then the last piece will be on Josh Storms and kind of the overall staff. So that's coming. Then we've got these interviews and stories coming this week. And as you said, man, these videos are great. We do these videos as much as we can, but we also have the written stories. We have our message boards where we interact with people on our message boards. So if you're not a subscriber to the website, you're not getting everything. You're getting a lot on the Warchant TV, but you're not getting everything. So use that trial offer that Aslan's been telling you about.
FSU one, again, the promo code. Thanks everybody for joining on the show, being in the chat. If you haven't done so, maybe hit the thumbs up on the way out. We would appreciate that. Give a shout out to Russ Vorhis, State Farm Agent, got you covered in Georgia, Alabama, and Florida. His website there, russvorhis.com. Stay connected to warchant.com, the ultimate Seminoles sports source. For Ira Aslan, thanks for watching. We'll see you somewhere elsewhere on the internet. All right. I think you're still there. I didn't end stream. Now